Welcome everybody to the Pick Six Weekly Recap, where we recap Miami's last, what I thought was going to be a victory, but this week it is a defeat. Rudy, our Canes fall to 10-2. We lose to the Syracuse Orange. Yeah, it's been a rough 4 days. Rough 4 days.
Yeah, it was painful to watch, and to be honest with you, I really didn't care to watch any more college football of any kind after that game, and frankly, don't really care to watch any more college football from here moving forward this season because that's how disgusted that game was. And look, we're recording this on a Tuesday night. I wholeheartedly expect there to be some sort of an announcement tomorrow by noon, being departures of a particular member of the staff.
Yeah. For multiple reasons had to redo this podcast to tonight, mainly because I was out of town and it's taken this long to recoup. Um it was a tough
Yeah.
loss. It was a really tough loss for a multitude of reasons. I'll start with the first one for me. The reason why this was the hardest is, and this is not me tooting my horn, but it's just like one of those things where you get a feeling and you're like, oh man. And I said at the very beginning of this year, I was like, everyone's worried about Louisville. Everyone's worried about so and so. I'm like, guys, it's Syracuse. It's Syracuse. It's Syracuse. And I wanted to be wrong. I desperately, desperately was like, please, Jesus, let me be wrong. And we go up 21, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna be wrong. This is gonna be fantastic. And that was probably the second hardest part about this loss was you're up 21. How do you blow that? Like, how do you
There's
like
there's
I
there's
just
2 ways. There's 2 ways. The first one, you start tinkering with your offensive personnel because that offense was unstoppable the
yeah.
first 3 drives. There was barely a negative play, and if there was, it was a penalty that was easily overcome. But what did they start doing? We were texting about it during the game. They started changing out a couple of offensive linemen. They brought in Jordan Lyle,
Yep.
who, by the way, don't get me wrong, everyone's talked about, like, great change of pace, but nobody was stopping the 11 that was on the field. And it was Mark Fletcher and Damian Martinez, and it was Isaiah Horton and Jacoby George, and it was, Elijah Arroyo, and it was Xavier Restrepo. All of a sudden, they start putting in Sam Brown, they start putting in
Yep.
Jordan Lyle, and the offense immediately started to sputter. And when that happened, the defense then stopped playing because they forced 2 punts to start that game that resulted in 14 Miami points. And once that started happening, that's where the alarm bell started going off because we've watched the same team this season. No bleed is safe for
Yeah.
Miami. Because you never know when that defense is going to let you down. And they did after the first quarter.
Yeah, I think that was the third thing that made this hurt so much more than it was funny. I've gone through all the stages of grief, denial, anger, acceptance. I've fully accepted it now, especially which we'll get into in a few minutes about the CFP rankings coming out. But um, the defense, man, God, God. I mean, the Lance Guidry thing, like you kind of let off with that, with his resignation, or see you later. Um, Up into this game, I wasn't on board. After this game, I'm on board. And I'm not on board because it's the last game of the season. We lost. It's the game that eliminated us from this playoff. Spoiler alert as we get into CFP rankings. Um, but to me, it is the inability to make adjustments, which is really weird because you look at Lance Guidry last season and all of the injuries we had on the defensive side of the ball, specifically with the D linemen, and for him to be able to make the adjustments to going from a 4-3 to a 3-3-5 or 3-3-5, it it baffled me this year. I was convinced and we had heard it. We had heard, and this is the again this a really bad part of what's going on with the defense is we heard it in the preseason. I mean, going into ACC media days, everyone was questioning the secondary. What is the secondary going to be like? This is Miami's weakest link is the secondary. Miami's weak in the secondary. And The first couple of games, we masked it a little bit, but you really saw it that Virginia Tech game. You really saw it from then on out. And for us not to be able to make the adjustments we need, whether it's scheming, player personnel changes, I don't know, but it was apparent in every single team from Cal on zeroed in on that. That
Yep.
you could tell every team from Cal on, because Cal really exposed it. From Cal on, they every team, even teams that are normally not teams that throw the ball like crazy, and or let's just name the team that had a broken quarterback and still beat us. Georgia Tech. What'd they do? They brought in a third string freshman quarterback to beat us. And so to me, it's again, I'm not trying I'm against throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but I don't think that is the case when you make a statement like Lance Guidry's got to go. Because you've had 12 games to make adjustments. It was the same thing. It was the same problem every time. And what makes me really sad is Cam Ward is going to lose the Heisman because of this defense. Because everyone talks about how, oh, but Cam Ward was, in these close games and these games that he lost and almost lost, and that's not Cam. Cam got you the points. You know what I mean? Like offensively, one of the number one, if not the number one offense for the majority of the season. It wasn't Cam.
Cam orchestrated the most prolific offense in Miami Hurricane history.
Exactly.
Period.
And statistics say that. And so to me, it just, if anything, you have a generational quarterback, you have an offense that you haven't seen since 2001, 2002. It's coaching malpractice. If Mario keeps Lance Guidry
I would
again,
expect a total cleaning of the assistants underneath Guidry if he stayed. Because look, you were talking a lot about what he did last year, what he was capable of doing last year. And
right?
don't get me wrong, I was trying to be a Lance Guidry apologist this entire season and
Same.
saying they'll figure it out, they'll fix
Exactly.
it. It's basic stuff, and that's part of where I think the big indictment comes in. Is that if it's not the coaching, then you guys swung and missed. When I say you guys, I mean the staff at
Yeah.
Miami swung and missed on uh, talent evaluation and just on overall football IQ because
Oh
this is
yeah.
stuff that is basic high school football that continuously gets missed. And this is where like watching that game was so frustrating to see like it's one thing to think that there's people back there to help you, but if you're looking at the coverage, it's basic defense that is being missed. It's is it trying to run something that's too complicated? I don't know because simplifying it should be you cover your man, and you just didn't see any of it. You kind of looked at like it was the opposite of defense. It was like, oh well, I'm not even going to chip the guy at the line of scrimmage. I'm going to let him go by, and I need to chase after him? Like those are the guys we're trying to hit. Okay. So yeah, I don't know what else to say other than the fish kind of rots at the head in this case. And if he's the head of your defense, I think some of the recruiting losses that you have too are going to come back to these are elite defensive players that if they don't believe in the scheme or if they don't believe in who the person is calling the defensive play, that's a problem.
Yeah, and what was weird to me was, and I don't know why, like this player has just been like in the back of my head all season, but Justin Scott. Um, I just want to kind of look at his stats, just because. Um, yeah, so two tackles, one sack, basically against South Florida and Florida A&M. I mean, this kid was touted. This was the big um OSU Ohio State flip that we got from Illinois. I mean, he was supposed to be like a pancake special kind of kid. What happened? Like,
I don't know.
I was expecting a Ruben Bain like 2.0 with this kid. And I never heard his name once. Now, was this like an NIL like slash like transfer portal thing where like, Simeon Barrow needed his reps and he needed to have a certain amount of reps to stay because let's all go again. Tinfoil theory. Uh, we remember the whole snafu with Simeon Barrow in the spring game where there were reports that he left the team and that he was going to go to Missouri because his dad apparently had a better deal there, which thank God he didn't go to Missouri because he would have been really pissed at being there. Um, but it makes me wonder why a guy like Justin Scott, who again was touted and was supposed to be this Ruben Bain 2.0, instant plug and play kind of kid. We stole him from Ohio State. I think he was a 5-star too. Like, what are we doing? And we'll get into this in the off season, but I kind of want to touch on it now. But uh, why are we not getting these 5-star recruits? Right? Like, we've got the NIL. We've proven with Cam Ward, if you can play, you're gonna get national attention, right? You're gonna make it. You're it's not like you're gonna go to Miami and be in some mediocre market and maybe be looked over. Like, the proof is in the pudding. Cam Ward, I mean, if I'm if I'm Mario right now, I mean, with the two flips that he's just lost that were major flips, one to an in-state rival who literally you nearly got fired. You nearly got your rival's coach fired this year. He somehow kept his job, don't know how, and then stole a 5-star from you. So I was telling, and we'll get into again in this offseason, I was telling a group of friends of ours, I was like, Mario in the next 3 to 4 months is going to dictate where this program is in the next 10 years. And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is if people start smelling blood in the water and they recognize that Miami doesn't have the coaches and the assistants to develop players, because look at Pickett. You think Pickett's going to come here?
Look, if I were DJ Pickett, I'd come here, but I think you're not making an early decision. I think you're waiting for the February window because you need to see what coaching changes are made by then.
Because
Because if
here's
you
my
bring
thing.
in, yeah,
He's all in on LSU, and that's because of LSU's DB coach. Apparently, he has a really good relationship with him. And then let's just face it. Like, LSU in the last decade has produced a lot of great defensive backs and safeties. Right. I'm going
yeah,
to give
skill positions,
right.
defensive back and wide receivers. Yeah.
You've got Brian Hartline in Ohio, stealing and taking the best wide receivers every year, right?
And they still can't beat Michigan.
Still can't be mission. I'm trying to figure out why we are not luring the because everyone thinks it's these kids. It's not the kids. When I tell you the kids are maybe 30% of the formula.
No,
What
I think it has to do with I
it's
think it's
coaching.
playoff implication because
It's
like I was full disclosure, I was sitting in traffic. My dad called a favor during Art Basel, so I got stuck for an hour in the car. So I didn't see the selection show or anything like that. But is Ohio State in or is Ohio State out?
so let's jump over to that real quick. We're gonna jump over to the college football rankings. We have Oregon at 1, Texas at 2, Penn State at 3, Notre Dame at 4, Georgia at 5, Ohio State at 6, so they fell 4 spots.
But they're in.
Tennessee at 7, SMU at 8, Indiana at 9, Boise State at 10, Alabama at 11, and then us rounding it out at 12 as the first team out. So Miami in the last regular season rankings falls 6 spots to number 12. We're the first team out. Um, it was between us and Bama pretty much. And Ward Manuel, who is the chairman of the CFP, basically said that Bama was the better team. And I'll read his quote really quick. What it came down to is that we evaluated both teams and looked at how they both ranked. Obviously, we think both highly of both teams. One's at 11, one's at 12, but it really came down to is Alabama is 3-1 against current top 25 teams, and Miami is 0-1. Alabama is 6-1 against teams above 500, and Miami is 4-2. Both have some losses that weren't what they wanted out of those games, but in the last 3 games, Miami has lost twice. So recency bias really helping Bama. But the thing with stats, and I learned this in a research class when I was majoring in sociology, is statistics and numbers can be misleading because you can take a stat and you can give two different points of view on it. You can highlight, depending on what the stat is, two completely different points of view. And I'll give you an example, right? So Ward Manuel just basically talked about how Alabama is 6-1 against teams above 500 and Miami is 4-2. Let's keep that number in mind because Tim Reynolds posted a day or two ago, said Miami has no home losses, no losses to sub 500 teams, 10 wins, and no losses by more than a touchdown. Keep that in mind. That's a pretty important stat. Now let's go to that 4-2 stat, right? Miami is 4-2 against bowl eligible teams on the road, right? That was what kind of they were referring to, and they said teams above 500, right? Here's the quote. Here's the crucial part of that little stat where we can flip that stat, right? Miami is 4-2 against bowl eligible teams on the road. Guess what Bama is? 1-3.
Yep. Yep. Look, if you want to look at a brand, Alabama's been the better team for the better part of 15 years.
Yep.
Um, they're not the better team this year, but I'll also say that Miami didn't do itself any favors by losing to
Yeah.
Syracuse in
Yeah,
Saturday.
let's be very just before because we've already gotten hit with some trolls in our comment section and I appreciate that. Like let them troll, they can troll. I appreciate it. As I learned in public relations, all publicity is good publicity.
Absolutely.
Um but we did this to ourselves. We are out
Yep.
not because of the committee. We're out because we lost 2 games. And
Yep.
the worst is we lost 2 games late in the season. I guarantee you, had the 2 losses only been the Virginia Tech and the Cal game, which were the 2 controversial call games, I guarantee you we would be in the playoffs 100% because we would win if we won out. Winning out, I'm saying. So we switched the 2 losses from the 2 last losses to the 2 early losses. That's what it is. It's funny because I was looking at Clemson's schedule this year and last year, and I was like, why is Clemson's schedule so like top heavy at the beginning of the season and just like tapers off? They're smart. They put the Citadel second to last game. Why not play the second? Because they know that
Well,
if you
they
if
had
they
that game
lose,
with South Carolina. Yeah. So
yeah,
they
but
always play a cupcake before that.
right, but still, the point is they front load their schedule so that if they do lose, you forget about it. Because let me tell
Yep.
you something. People talk about Clemson losing to Georgia and it being a drubbing. Don't get me wrong. But it's not the first thing that comes to mind until you start talking about Clemson and Georgia in the same sentence. You start talking about Clemson, people will just blah, 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 blah. Oh, and then it's an afterthought. People don't start the conversation off with Clemson got ran through in the first week of the season. No one talks about that. It's a footnote, right? It's not just like Alabama got molested by a 6-6 Oklahoma team. Like that happened 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
But no one talks about that. So we can I'll sit there and I'll call facts facts. Yes, we did this to ourselves. We eliminate ourselves. We only have ourselves to blame. That does not also negate, because 2 things can be true at the same time, the fact that there is an SEC bias. That
Oh, yeah.
also that
Yeah.
also goes to the fact that there is a brand bias in this. Like again, if you don't think that the media and that the CFP love Alabama, look what happened last year, pushing FSU out. And again, this I am no FSU apologist. There is no team, no program I hate more than FSU.
Nope.
But they got snubbed. And then this year, another Florida team got snubbed by Alabama. And that Bama team is not good. I'm not saying we're great, and I'm not saying we are head over shoulders better than them. But if you're looking at record, I 10-2 to me is better than 9-3.
Yep.
4-2 against bowl eligible teams on the road is better than 1-3.
Yep.
Being
I totally
undefeated
agree
at
with you.
home,
And
like
if you
we go ahead.
look back at that Florida State team from last year, and it shows you what the fire is like for Mario Cristobal to circle the wagons and fix everything in the next 2 months, because they have to avoid an epic collapse like that next year by
Well,
having to find talent.
I mean, well, here's the thing, and again, we'll get into this in the offseason as well. You're gonna there is a very strong potential we could be Florida State 2.0. I mean, we won't have the epic collapse of going 2-10. But if you were to tell me if future Chris or Rudy came back from the future and was like, "Hey, bro, we're gonna go 6-6 next season," I would not be surprised. You
Yeah.
wouldn't you wouldn't hit me. I wouldn't be like, "Wow, no way." I'd be like, "Yeah, I mean, we're losing a lot of key players. This recruiting class is not looking like last year's or the year before's. And sad to say, I mean, barring some wild, wild developments in the transfer portal, there's not guys like Cam Ward going into the transfer portal this season, like
Yeah,
this
and
year.
so the one thing about the ranking that we went there to is the conversation we had before this was, so why are the kids going other places? Why are they going to like an Ohio State? Why are they
Yep.
going to, all these other big name schools that necessarily aren't, blowing the doors off of people? But what's the difference between Miami landing those 5 stars and here? It's because those brands get in the playoff regardless of what their record is. Ohio State just lost to Michigan, who had 5 losses. So they're not getting in the Big Ten championship game. They're in the playoff. Why? Because they lost their last game of the year. It was their second loss of the season, but they're in the Big Ten. That's a bigger name brand. They got more white people that are giving them media attention, and said, "Okay, cool. That's what they're going to do." So that's why they go there versus going to
Well, I
Miami.
mean, yes, yes and no. So I'll agree with you. Yes, it is a brand thing, but I think a lot of it also is the coaching and development. A lot of these kids are looking at how do I get to the NFL and how do I get a good high draft pick, right? And it's like, who's going to develop me? And I'm not saying like development is everything. It's a good thing. It's a crucial part of the game, I think, still, even though some people will say otherwise. But it's like if this guy can make this guy and this guy and this other guy NFL, first rounders, I think I'm that. I'm gonna go there, right? It has nothing to do with, I feel like, anymore, which is sad because this is what made college football, and we talked about this earlier in the season, special is like your daddy played there, and then your uncle played there, or your grandfather played there, and then you grew up in this area, and so to have the U on your helmet meant something. Kids these days are just mercenaries and they're bounty hunters, and I get that. And do you, bro? Like I'm never going to fault a kid for like pulling himself out of the gutter and bettering him and his family's life. I'll never do that ever. Good for you. But Miami then needs to understand that's the game, and no one wants to come play for the U. Like, we need, like, I love the tradition and I love the history of UM and the swag and whatever. It's bullshit. No one cares about that. None of these kids have ever seen Miami be competitive. The two times we have been competitive, and I think it was 2017, where we also went 10-2,
Lost
we
two
we
games.
we lost our last two games. We lost two out of the three last games.
Yep.
Like,
Actually,
that's
you
it.
lost three in a row because you lost
Oh
at
yeah, and then
Pitt
we
last
lost
game
the
of the
pinstripe
season,
bowl, whatever that
two
was.
Clemson AC championship game, Wisconsin in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
by the way, they're going to play in a bowl game, and I don't see many people playing in that bowl game. So you're likely
No,
going to lose a third.
well, that's also what I meant by FSU 2.0 is I think you're going to see just like how FSU had a lot of other players. I think a lot of our players are going to opt out too. I think we're going to see that as well. And
Yeah.
and it's and I don't blame, again. I don't blame them. I think FSU got a lot of crap last year for it, and I get it because you got snubbed. But on top of that, the landscape of college football is changing. There's no such thing as bowls anymore. Like bowls are meaningless. When we got to the Pop Tart Bowl, like that was it. Like okay, these bowls are completely like trivial and meaningless. Like no one
Yep.
cares about these. The only bowls that matter now are part of the college football playoff, and that's it. And so the season is over. We should just accept for what it is and move on. And we will. I think there are though just things that we should. I mean, is there anything else, Rudy, you wanted to talk about in terms of the game, the Syracuse game that like
Let me build on one thing that you were talking about before, and then I'll jump into the game because you were
sure.
talking about like having a pipeline to the NFL, working with guys like Brian Hartline. I would argue that he's not so much developing players; he just has connections to NFL front offices. I think he knows GMs because of his time in the league and because of what he was doing in the NFL after retiring from playing too. I think he just has a really good network of people to say, we're going to put you on this draft board and we're going to highlight you as this main player. But like Marvin Harrison Jr. was NFL ready in high school. And I would
Well, I
say the
mean,
same thing
all of
about
them are.
Jeremiah
By the
Smith.
way, almost all of them are. I
Yeah.
mean, almost every wide receiver that has come out of Ohio State and been drafted, by the way, like I mean that's a crucial peg,
Yeah.
has has been legit. Like, and I'm not faulting that. Again, I'm not hating the game. I want
Yep.
us to play that game. You
Yep.
know, it's not about facilities anymore, and
Nope.
it's about it's literally about networking and getting money. It's a
Yep.
business. It's literally it's college football. It's a sport to the extent that it's played on Saturdays, yes, but so much that impacts that Saturday is a business.
Yep.
It's how much are you spending on each kid? Who
Yep.
who are your assistants? Because look at what happened to FSU. FSU just got Gus Malzahn. I mean, again, this is a trend that we knew was coming anyways with Chip Kelly leaving UCLA to go to Ohio State as OC, but like Gus Malzahn's going to be the OC at FSU. Like,
And I'm curious on how that's gonna go because he's running from a sinking ship in Orlando.
yeah, again, do I think FSU is going to come out guns blazing next year and completely turn their program around and they're going to be 10-2? Absolutely not. That trust me, that ship still has a lot of holes in itself and is rudderless as we speak, but I still think it says a lot where you can get a name because again, that's what this comes down to. Like Nick Saban built Alabama by the name Nick Saban.
Yep.
Like I'm not saying in year 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, but in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, he built that team saying, I'm Nick Saban. I went to LSU. I won a national championship. I used to be in the NFL.
Yep.
And that's why kids went to him. And he put together great rosters and he had a great system. Like he's a system guy. He had systems for everything. And he's a great leader. And those are great things. But like let's not get it twisted. Names matter. Dan Lanning is getting people to go to Oregon who no one could get to Oregon. Chip Kelly, Mario, people who are great recruiters could not get the talent that Dan Lanning is getting. Is Dan Lanning an exponentially better recruiter than Mario or Chip Kelly? No, but he's Dan Lanning. He was at Georgia. He was under Nick Saban. Like it's again, this is name brand, this is branding at its finest. And the faster people get to recognizing this, the faster you're going to turn a program around. And that's why I'm really hoping Mario, I don't care what he has to do, he needs to open up whatever like bank vaults he needs to open up and he needs to hire a dynamite DC and get a defensive back coach in here that is next level. I mean, at this point, I know this sounds stupid and this is just me being a homer, but I'm like, we need splash. Bring Ed Reed. I don't care. I know it sounds stupid. I know it sounds homer. Anyone is better than who we have.
Yeah. Yeah,
And if
I
it,
100% agree with you. I mean, look,
and
even the defensive backs coaches knew when he came from University of South Florida, and that's not a step up.
no, and no one wants to go play for that. Like these are kids, guys. These aren't adults. These are kids. Like, what do kids like? Shiny objects. Trust me, I've got 3 of them. Like, I can tell
Yeah.
you exactly how to get a kid's attention. Waggle a shiny toy in front of them, and that's what they want. But you know who the shiny toy is? It's the coach with the name. It is. You go to these programs and you look, and that's what it is. Uh, and I just don't understand because the money is one thing, but money is a thing when you're talking about like West Virginia and Miami
Yeah.
or Purdue and Miami. That's when money discrepancy really gets in. But when you get to the upper echelon levels, like with Ohio State, Oregon, Miami, yes. Are we spending as much as they are? No. But are we on the same level? Yeah. And if you look at like the tier system of what college football used to be 5, 10 years ago, we weren't even in the same stratosphere smelling them.
Yep.
Like we were 4 or 5 levels below them. But
Yep.
now with NIL and the transfer portal, you can jump up but the thing is you've with a program like Miami, which like I hate to admit this, we're not a blue blood.
No,
We
never
we
have been.
don't we don't have that name brand recognition. We don't have that pageantry. We don't have that history. We it's like
No.
it's
Our
just not
tradition
what it
was
is.
beating your ass and making fun of you for it. That
Exactly.
was what the tradition was.
And so you that's what you got to get back to. You got to
Yeah.
don't just yo, like that's why I said like I was joking the other day about like, like the vices of Miami, but it's like that's why kids come down here sometimes. They want to come party, they want to come live a certain lifestyle. And let me tell you something. If again, I've never been a college football player. I'm not going to assume to be one, but I'll just talk about lifestyle like options. If you're telling me I can live off 6 figures plus in Miami or live with 6, 7 figures plus in Tuscaloosa, I'm picking Miami 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah. Yeah, you're
Nine out
you're
of ten
getting
times.
you're getting access to the most to advance your career both professionally and should you want to go into something else outside of football in one of the better places to live in the world that people want to go to. You have access to the best care, the best rehabilitation, the best like the only thing you don't even have the best doctors in Alabama. They have to go to Birmingham for that.
Right.
So
And so to my so what is it then? What is it, Rudy? What are driving kids to Columbus, Ohio? What are
it's
driving kids to Eugene, Oregon?
it's the eyeballs. It's because they're getting larger media contracts and they're getting larger crowds, and that's what it is. And look, what we've learned this year that we already knew last year from the Florida State debacle, what we've known for a while is that the ACC is just a joke of a conference. And I'm not saying that in terms of the competition, because if we look this year, the playing field was actually pretty flat. I mean, the teams actually competed with the best in other conferences. It's just a joke in terms of respectability. Nobody wants to go play in the ACC.
Yeah,
So
I mean, if you look at you, I mean, the ACC, yeah, it's not a great conference, man.
it's a
Like
joke from a visibility standpoint. Even though the quality of play is comparable to what you've seen in the SEC and the Big Ten this year, it's still looked at as a laughing stock.
it
And
is because
it's
like
one of those things where if you don't go undefeated in the conference, you're not going to get any respect.
yeah, and the saddest part is you have teams like Syracuse and Duke who are both 9-3. Same
Yeah.
record as Ole Miss, same record as South Carolina, same record as Alabama. But when I tell you those teams are not even remotely in the same room, let alone or even in the same state, let alone the same room, it's disgusting. And you really understand why Clemson and FSU are trying to get out because to them it's they are the ACC equivalent of SMU. Like SMU knew, like they're like this program is going to go nowhere in the American. We'll take our
Yep.
chances. We'll take our chances in the ACC, even if we fall on our face. We would rather fall on our face in a plush like carpeted room than like a floor full of daggers, which is what the American Conference is basically. Because that's a dying conference. That's a
Yeah.
dead conference as it is. And it's the same thing with these huge programs like Clemson and FSU. It's like we would rather fall on our face in the SEC, go 6-6, then go 10-2 in the ACC, and really not even have a chance
And for
of winning.
SMU's sake, if they end up climbing up higher out of this, they could say, well, we got the money to buy out that grant of rights and get ourselves over if we have a bid come our way. So fine, we'll write the check. They don't
Well,
really care.
I'll say this. I think so. I think you have different tiers in football, and SMU, yes, like they have a pride. They're a proud program that sadly got the death penalty in the '80s and are just
Mhm.
recovering from it. But when you're out of the game and when you're out of relevance for 40 years, basically, you're never I'm sorry, there's
No.
no way to come back from that. It literally was the death sentence. Like and people like say, "Oh, you nearly killed the program." Like, no, the program can still compete. So, I realistically don't see SMU ever leaving the ACC. I think unless like they brought like the Southwest Conference back or they did like some massive realignment where Texas
Right.
teams got together. Because think about it. Think about it from their standpoint now. They came in their first year and they're about to win the ACC. What
Yeah.
what what incentive do they have to leave? They
With
could
with a
win this.
bunch of Miami transfers.
It, they literally from now on could run the conference if like I'm saying if FSU leaves, if Clemson leaves, which most likely means we will most likely leave, like you have the run of the mill. And
Yeah.
if they're Power Four conference, so they get automatic bid, even if it's the fifth seed, they'll make the playoffs every year. They're like Notre Dame, but in a conference. That's what they'll look
Yeah.
like. You know what I mean? And so to me, they're really again. I said this at the beginning of the season. We were talking about conference realignment. There needs to be someone needs to step up, and it's not going to be Swanky. It's or Sankey, whatever hell his name is, or Petiti. They only care about themselves. And what's really sad is I was watching a great video today on how like sports like NASCAR, well not sports, but like NASCAR and the WWE basically they had a problem, kind of like what the NFL did at first, where just a little quick history lesson. So, like the NFL, before they had the draft and salary caps and all these things, you had like 4 or 5 teams that were basically buying players from college and always winning. That's why you have like these teams that have like 7 Super Bowls or whatever. None of them have that, but you know what I mean? Like teams that were just constantly winning at the beginning. And so the NFL quickly realized, they were like, listen, no one's going to watch this if the same teams are winning every year. And the same thing is going to happen to the NCAA if someone doesn't get involved. Because even if let's just say SEC and the Big Ten pick up their ball and they go home, and they have their own conference. That's going to be cool for like 2 or 3 seasons, and then people aren't going to care because that's not what makes college football awesome. What makes college football awesome is you have the team from the Midwest playing a team from the South for a specific like bowl or bragging rights, right? And then you have a team from, Texas playing a team from California to see who has the better quarterback. And it's this regionality that really makes college football. When you have the Big Ten and the SEC only, like, yeah, granted they have, USC and Oregon right on the West Coast, and obviously Washington and UCLA. But what do you do when those teams get people get bored of watching those teams? Because like there's no history between Washington and Michigan. Like no one cares about that, but people love to watch the Apple Cup because they've been playing that for 100 years. I mean, I don't know how many years they've been playing, but like that's what makes it interesting. And it's like when you remove a major element out of a sport or out of a program, it's going to take it away. It's going to dilute it, and that's, I'm not just saying this because Miami's eliminated, but if you're blind and you're not paying attention to these things, you're missing what's happening in college football right now. And a 10-2 Miami team, and again, I know we did this to ourselves, and we only have ourselves to blame. But a 10-2 team that is missing the playoffs because they play in what is perceived to be a weaker conference, which that is an argument for another day. That is a sign that this conference is DOA. Like they kept FSU out last year. They're keeping us out this year. They're basically saying like ACC is a one horse team. They're funny that we're sending the ponies. Um, that's not good for college football. And
No.
if you think that teams, I would not be surprised. I was telling the same group of friends, I was like, I guarantee you, Radakovich right now is booking a trip to Birmingham and to Indianapolis in the next 3 months. I guarantee you. I get because no one's fighting for the ACC. There's no one fighting for the SEC, ACC. No one is petitioning, and by the time you petition, you're petitioning way too late. When the first AP poll preseason rankings came out, Jim Phillips should have been all like on every Fox, CBS Sports, ESPN, just literally scorched earth, losing his mind. I don't care if he looks like an idiot. I don't care if he looks like a lunatic. Say the most outlandish, crazy things you want to say. Get the attention and the eyes on the ACC, whatever you do. And then you go tell teams like FSU, listen, whatever money you want to split, cool, we'll do that. Is that what you want to stay? Cool. Because you have FSU and Clemson leave. When I tell you, if you think the ACC is a sinking ship now, it will completely implode when those two programs leave.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely. What I will tell you though is, if Dan Radakovich is not going to fight for Miami on that end, then he's going to find himself in Joe Echeverria's office pretty soon, because I think they understand the urgency at the administrative level now in terms of university leadership. Whether the athletics department gets the alert or sees the same urgency is yet to be seen. I think that's something that we'll know in the next couple of weeks. But I will tell you, the absolute failure of this athletic department to find good corporate partners with a team like they had this year, with the personalities that they had this year, I think is a major failure for them. And I think it's going to affect their attendance and their ability to get money from corporate partnerships to move forward. So
and it's not
yeah,
even it's not even just that. Like it's again when you if you see your neighbor getting a check in the mail for $1,000 every day, and you're not getting any money, or you're getting $100, like at some point you need to go over and ask your neighbor, like, how are you getting $1,000 every day? And then they tell you, oh, like, well, because I live in this part of the neighborhood. Oh, okay, well, how do I get into that part of the neighborhood immediately? Because that's what's basically happening.
yeah,
Like
they
you
don't
have
have a guy like that. I'll just tell you right now, they have a guy that says, "Well, I've been really happy on this side of the road, and I've been here for a while, and this is the way
it's
it's always been."
it's
And
completely
that's not the way to look at it.
yeah, it's completely unacceptable. When you have Purdue, Indiana, Vanderbilt, Mississippi
Northwestern.
State, Northwestern. I'm just naming all these bottom barrel teams from the SEC and Big 10. When you have these teams making 40, 50 million dollars in the next couple of years more than you annually, and then you're going to have to pay your players starting next year
Mhm.
somewhere in the ballpark of 20 million dollars. No. No, it's unacceptable. It's funny in hindsight now, you really understand why FSU and Clemson are like, We'll spend ungodly amounts of money to get out of this." Because like they saw the writing on. I gave the ACC the benefit of the doubt. I was like, no, the ACC will come back. The ACC will bounce back. It
Yeah.
will, it will write strong. And not only that, I thought that mainly because we were having such a great season, and that I knew we would be a good team and a contender. That and I thought Clemson honestly would be a contender as well. I figured just those two programs in itself, and then maybe we would have a dark horse team. I didn't think SMU, but another team like a dark horse team come through. I was like, maybe we can really hold the toe. And NC State was supposed to be a good team this year. I was like, oh, maybe they can beat Tennessee. These intra-conference matches that we were getting, I was like, maybe we can prove ourselves. No.
No,
And
you needed to run the table in the conference to be anywhere near respected. It was Big East 2.0, essentially. You needed to just run through the conference. And, this is something without talking about the game specifically, but something that I think Mario Cristobal is going to have to learn and that the football program is going to have to learn is that uh, they kind of have to take their gloves off a little bit because as aggressive as they have been in recruiting, I think they've been a little too respectful to
how
the
so?
country. I just look when you see the Syracuse coach's comments after that game, talking about, "Hey, Dabo, did you a favor. You're welcome." You have to understand that when you're at Miami, and I don't know if maybe Mario Cristobal has been around different parts of the country for a long time and has forgotten how it doesn't matter when you're at Miami how many connections you had, how many friends you've had across the country. As soon as you come back home, you're public enemy number one, and everyone is going to turn their back on you at every step. So you can't be a nice guy anymore. You have to blow teams out. So when you go back and you look at that Florida State game where, yeah, they treated it like it was a warm up, they didn't really show anything in their playbook. You need to beat teams by 70. You need to be able to do that.
Okay, well, let's actually talk about that really quick because this
Yeah,
is something I've actually really wanted to know, and I would love to get a second perspective. Why can't we blow teams out like that? Why are we
because
not doing?
they don't have the
Why are?
defense.
But here's serious question, and I want
Yeah.
to know your perspective on this. Why are we so inconsistent? Why have we been for the better part of 2 decades one of the, if not the most inconsistent program in college football?
I think it's a multitude of things. I just don't think there's been the leadership there from
Okay,
a coaching staff perspective, and I don't think there's really been the aggressive mindset. Because if you want to look at all these programs and what they have in common, when you look at like a Nick Saban is it's this place, it's Alabama, or it's nothing. If you're thinking about anything else, you don't have a spot on this team. You're not going to transfer. You're not going to go anywhere else. We're going to bury you on the depth chart. It's about us, and it's only about us.
okay. So
You
let's
look at
take Nick
Ohio
Saban.
State's the same way.
Okay. Oh, okay. Because I was gonna say, let's take Nick Saban and bottle that up because Nick Saban
Okay,
is such an anomaly. And I truly
that's
believe this to a certain extent. I believe Nick Saban leaving college football one was gonna like he's one of those things like he's just like he came in and he completely disrupted the system of college football. He did something that we haven't seen ever
yeah,
realistic. Like I don't remember in my lifetime ever there being a dynasty like Alabama,
yeah.
who was consistently playing for national championships and in them like that. But I also said on the tail end of that or the opposite end of that when he leaves, it is also going to create space for other programs, other ships to rise. But let's
It's a
just
vacuum.
right, there's a vacuum.
It's a
But my
vacuum.
my 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 question and the focus I'd like to keep on is why do programs like Ohio State? Why do programs like LSU? Why do programs like Oregon? How are these teams that again, I'm not seeing anything special about them. There's nothing like Ohio State I get because it's a blue blood, it's an old school thing, but if again, if you look at the history, when I was doing the history of the game, when you look at it, it's a very Michigan one-sided kind of thing. And even you're
Yep.
seeing in the last couple years, they're Ohio State is little brother to Michigan, right?
Yep.
And then Michigan had their time in the early 2000s when Ohio State was on the rise, obviously, and doing their thing, and especially under Urban Meyer, where they had their success. But they're still successful. They're a very consistent. Josh Pate always puts it like this: there's teams and there's programs. How are they a great program
Yeah.
compared to
Uh,
us, where
I
we're just a mediocre
I
program, to
brought up
say that?
Alabama specifically because Mario Cristobal was there. He saw it firsthand. So there should be a learning there of understanding what you need to bring to the table in terms of mentality. Oregon is like that because of Dan Lanning now. He's taken Mario Cristobal's players, he's recruiting his own guys, and they're just winning. And look, they're getting a transfer portal quarterback to do it every time, but it doesn't matter. They're getting the talent. Ohio State's doing it because as much as we criticize Ryan Day for not being able to win the big one, he knows how to circle the wagons. He knows how to make enemies out of people when they're not. He knows how to use things to specifically motivate their players. Look, he got Ohio State is as good as they are this year because they brought most of their talent back when they could have went to the NFL
Yeah,
because they really wanted to beat Michigan that badly. They didn't do it, but they brought everybody back to make a run at the playoffs. And look, if they say, well, we lost to Michigan, but we end up taking this college football playoff bid and winning a national championship out of it, I think they'll forgive themselves for not beating Michigan in 4 years. And the fact that you can't beat your rival for 4 years and still have a chance to win the national championship is another thing to be said. So
yeah.
that's how those guys are doing that.
I just am. It's very confusing to me to see like schedules, and you can look as an Ohio State fan, as a Oregon Ducks fan. I don't want to say LSU fan because that's different, but I was just using them. But let's just stick with Ohio State and Oregon, right? You can look at their schedule, and as a fan, again, I'm not part of their fan base, but as a third party member, I can go, okay, they're going to win, lose, win. With
Yeah.
Miami, you can maybe do that, but as a fan, you damn well know you're like, no, we could lose this game. We could lose this game. We don't.
That's
There's not a confidence in the sense of like, oh, I feel like we can do that, but there is this weird thing where we play down to opponents. We lose games we shouldn't lose. We sometimes win games we shouldn't win. The games that we this is just something I've noticed over the last 10 years. Games that look great at the beginning of the season, not so good. I mean, the Florida game this year, thank God, was an actual great win, I think, this year.
yeah,
But you look at like the Texas A&M game we played 2 years ago, and we beat them. That really wasn't a
yeah.
good Texas A&M team. The
No,
Florida game we played like 6 years ago, that wasn't a good Florida team. The Notre Dame game, not the Bandy pick six, but the other one that we played and we beat them. Not a good Notre Dame team. Like, I'm just wondering. I'm like, why is there such a discrepancy at Miami?
to
Like,
me, it's a mentality. It's a mentality and a preparation thing because as much as the fans think it's like, oh, well, the players know it's us against the world. And yeah, look, you watch the offense talk shit to everybody and throwing the thumbs down early in the season. And yeah, they were the number one offense. They were able to talk as much smack as they want, and they pretty much outscored everybody. But it doesn't carry on. The fact that you can watch a Miami team and you could say, okay, how many times have we said the ACC championship is in sight? They are in the driver's seat. Is everything in their way? Even Miami teams that had 5 losses in a year, they were always at some point in the driver's seat in the top of either the division when the divisions are still a thing, or they were still just a lock to make the championship game, and they always stumble. There's
yeah,
something to be said of when you when you play when there's everything on the line, it looks different. And when you watch these Miami teams as of late in the past 15 years, when everything's on the line and it's not like a rival that doesn't have a big ranking next to them, they don't show up. They just come up flat. And this is it's frankly what you saw on Saturday was such an absolute abomination to show like you knew what the stakes were going in. You knew
yeah,
that you had to absolutely win. It was win or nothing. And that was the total team effort that came out of it. That's where there's a cultural issue still.
yeah. And it's weird though too. It's again, and I don't know if it's just like our lot in life, but it's like if I feel like if we were Alabama, or we were in Oregon or Michigan or an Ohio State, and we went. It doesn't have to be the same teams, but it could be the same outcomes in terms of you lose to a mid tier or uh, B B level team. They would still get the benefit of the doubt.
Of course.
And I'm not saying it's a media hates Miami because that can only go on for so long. Like at some point, there's a turnover in the media where you get a new generation, you get a new set of eyes, you get a new hierarchy, you get a new perspective, and it changes, right? Like so,
They're
like you'll
bred the
have
same way. They're not gonna change because these are the same people who are brought up the same way as their daddy and their granddaddy, and they're all taught to hate Miami. I mean, look, we talked about this earlier in the other podcast episodes that we've done. Whole lot of Southerners getting into this. And college football has always been kind of a Southern thing, and they've always hated Miami. They've always called the kids thugs, and the fan base is fair weathered, and that will continue for as long as you want. The only difference is whether Miami gets the talent that doesn't care and is happy to wipe the floor with people with a half empty stadium. That's
yeah,
the only thing that's going to change. But the media is going to be the exact same. As much as Josh Pate says the right things about Miami in the offseason, as much as a JD Pickell says the same thing, it is still going to be a cacophony of Josh Pate's, JD Pickell's, Kirk Herbstreit's. There is no room for anybody else in college football in terms of how you want to spread the wealth with publicity. It's always going to be that way. And that's why
yeah,
if you look at the conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten, there's something they have in common with the same media figures that are saying all these things. So
yeah,
it's Miami has to just embrace that bad boy image, not in terms of like the swagger like we keep talking about, but having to understand that you have to keep your talent home and you have to bring them to the league with your network that you have, because the Miami network,
yeah.
again, we can compare us to anybody else in terms of pipeline to superstardom in the NFL and beyond. Nobody does it like Miami does.
No, and I mean realistically, I mean let's just say every kid had to stay home, we would win a national championship every year.
Absolutely. And
We
you
would,
would
and if
also
if you
have
ask
better
you, I
coach.
mean, even Dion said he's like, where who are the dogs? Who are the dogs? Where do you get dogs from? They go Florida. You go
Yep.
to Florida.
And
If you
and
want to,
and
if you
if
want,
you
if you want a player, you go to Florida, and it's the truth. So it's like again, we've already gone on for almost an hour. We beaten a dead horse at this point, but we'll discuss more about this in the off season. It was a rough week between a horrible loss, two, two 5-star recruits flipping to other schools. But hopefully we can get this thing together, man. Rudy?
Look, we'll know what the headlines look like later this week, and that should chart the course of what's going to happen and what the urgency looks like. But it should be everybody on fire at the Hecht Athletic Center this
Yeah.
week.
Well, you know what? The great thing about all of this, Rudy, is it can only go up. This week
I
can
mean,
only
can
get
it? I
it
don't
can
know.
listen, it can't get worse. This week can't get worse for us Canes, man. I mean literally like
Look, if they start
the
racing
season's
the
over.
coach through the
Like
practice
the,
facility,
the season is over. It's over. It's all about 2025 now. Ain't no one care about no bowl that we're gonna play in. Ain't no one gonna play in no bowl we're gonna play in. It's
nope.
about early signing day that starts tomorrow, going into spring, and then the transfer portal. So we will see it. We thank all of you for sticking around for this long. It's been a fun season so far. We're going to have tons of stuff in the off season. We're going to have stuff coming up for this championship week. We will see you guys on Friday. Thank you for watching. Have a great week, y'all. And as always, we still love 'em. Go Canes.
Go, Canes.
I love you, Rudy. It's going to be better, man. It's going to get better. I promise it's going to get better. Thank y'all for watching.